content of this channel is for mature audiences. Parental discretion is advised. You're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. Please make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell notification button. And please, feel free to share the video. Thank you. Okay, man, I should have sound now. I don't know what was going on with the stream, man. A little bit of technical difficulties, man. Can you hear me now, man? If you can hear me right now, give me a shout out, man. Put a 1 in the chat, man, to let me know if you can hear me right now. I'm sorry that got off to a bumpy start. Put a 1 in the chat if you can hear me, gentlemen. Please make sure that you can help me, assist me in this endeavor. I came on in one of the programs that I had up. It went down. But at any rate, man, thank you. I see I'm audible now. And thank you, Rashid Barnes. I appreciate your donation, man. And he asked me if that was one of my tracks. And indeed, it is one of my tracks, man. So thank you for your support. And eventually what I'm going to end up doing is shifting what I got going on the Afrobeat Live channel to this channel. So while you're waiting on me to do the stream that I'm doing, or streams like I'm doing right now, the music is going to just be looping 24/7, man. So perhaps maybe you'll check it out then when I shift it over to this channel. So at any rate, man, I want to give a shout out to all the members of the Green Gorilla channel. And I apologize for the technical difficulty getting started here. But I want to give a shout out to all the members of the Green Gorilla channel before I get things going. So shout out to Kyle J. Sewer, Brotherly Love 215, Kareem Not Karen, Lord Hamal, Troy Warren, Blacksword 404, Jeff R., Mrs. K.P. Bailey, and Cutting Up with the Jones. Big up to y'all, man. Big up to Show Me, Ricky Dawson, Raiz Muajid, Michael Ross, Alan Wiley, The Face, Lee Ways, Mantis on Break, Electrician 480, Life of Commerce, and Apex Prowler. Big up to y'all. Big up to Julius Ferguson, Truth 7360, J. Cleveland Green, J. Bino the Advocate, Herbert Lewis, D. Scott, Marvin Evans, Lotus Eater, Rogason, and L. Fry. Big up. Big up to Timothy Blewett, Jeffrey Speed, Marvin Battle Jr., Mark Holt, John J., the IDP Expressions, Afro Troop TV, Adam Tahuti, and BGS Ibmore. Big up. Big up to Ignatz Mouse, Brian Peace, Papa Dida, Scott Haywood, Black Uru Strikes. Man, my screen jumped on me. Dr. Treat 33 and Leroy Honeycutt, Broken Blade, Super Tech, 77 Bass X, Brian McMurray, K-Ron S, Anthony Davis, Artisan MC, Damon Brown, and Donnell 360. Big up. Big up to Seven Coast Dojo, Pulpit 28, Charles Rogers, Rick Ross, Sandra Jean, Charles Gilmore, Patricia Colley, Greg, Barry Little, Mr. Valentino. Big up. Big up to Jason Hales, Black Men Being Brutally Honest, Cameron 87, Dr. Rock, Jay Charles, Mark Swift, Odd Collar, Donna Watts, hiphop.catv, and Coach DC. Big up! Big up to Old Soul Chief, Mr. Blue Collar, Barnolis, I'm Just Jules, TD Hip Hop Media, Drew Main, Mr. Heat, Sir Anthony, and ML Law. Big up! Big up to Universal 178, Rasheed Barnes, Aaron Smith, DH, Beware the Revelator. I thought you would see Truth the Revelator, man. Now beware the Revelator now. Okay, I feel you, dog. Gold Professor, Aaron Infinite, Dr. Tiasan Johnson, Kalon Jakala, and Hostile ADEP. Big up. W. Pierre 1, man. Big up. And I can't forget my brother in heaven, Forrest Windu. My brother in heaven, Kevin Samuels. And I can't forget my brother in heaven, David Carroll, man. Big up to all y'all, man. And on the Patreon side, big up to Charles Fottentot. I am the light of my father, Waffle Weave, Lamont Latimer, William Joyner, Rufus Winfield, Darnell Smith, Excalibur, Jason Warren, Anu 219, Presur Prisoner, Taz, Dragon 59, Adrian Hicks, Jay Bailey, Mr. Michi, and the Sang. Well, big up to all y'all, man. Straight up. Big up to all y'all, man. Thank you so much for supporting the Green Gorilla channel, man, and riding with me through these waves. And big up to Show Me, man. I appreciate the super sticker, my brother. Straight up. Real talk. Appreciate that. And all the people out there in the chat. I see all of y'all, man. Big up to y'all, man, and peace to all of y'all out there. And if you want to find out how to support the Green Gorilla channel, man, by becoming a member, well, here's how you do that. What's good, everybody? I'm the G with a PhD, and you're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel, the place where black men can express themselves freely, straight up, no chaser. Today, I want to introduce you to my new membership program that consists of 5 levels where you can invest in the Green Gorilla channel on a monthly basis and receive level-specific perks. Memberships are special because they improve the quality of the content of the channel and will help me to be able to keep the channel going. Now, to participate in the Green Gorilla channel membership program, all you have to do is hit the join button, which is located right next to the subscribe button on my channel page. Now, for all of my subscribers who decide not to participate in my membership program, nothing will change. The content will keep coming the way it always has. Thanks for watching, and be careful out here, people. Bless. All right, y'all, I'm back. Again, you know who I be. I'm GG. You tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. It's the place where black men can express themselves freely, straight up, no chaser. Had a few fumbles and stumbles as the show started, but we on track right now. I got all the audio and the visual units going the way they should be, and I apologize for any disruptions in the regularly scheduled programming. But as it stands, man, the topic of the show today is any black man will do, and everybody knows it. And when I say everybody knows it, I mean everybody knows it. So let me play out some scenarios for you really quickly, and afterwards I'll make it explicit what it is that I'm trying to articulate with the title of the show today. So imagine that there's a pregnant woman, Carol D. Maidi Stewart, and her husband, Charles, who drove to a hospital. In fact, it was Brigham and Women's Hospital, located just outside of Boston's African-American community, Mission Hill, also known as Area B. On the night of October 23rd, 1989, Charles took a shortcut through Area B, the black part of town. He pulled the car over and shot his wife, then himself in the stomach. Guess what he did next? He called the police, stating that an African-American man, posing as an undercover police officer, pulled them over, attempted to rob them, and then shot them at point-blank range. We already know what happened to his wife, Carol, and her unborn child died. The death of a white pregnant woman shot by a black man caused a black manhunt to begin. William Willie Bennett fit the profile of the person falsely alleged to have committed the crime. At the time of Bennett's arrest, police began to suspect Charles of the murder. And on January 2nd, 1990, Matthew Stewart, who just so happened to be Charles's brother, revealed Charles's elaborate plan to receive $100,000 from Carol's life insurance policy. On January 5th, 1990, police found Charles's new sports car by the Mystic River and Charles Stewart's body floating in the river. Charles Stewart committed suicide. Another scenario, on October 24th, 1994, in the small South Carolina town of Union, Susan Smith strapped her 3-year-old and 14-month-old sons into their car seats and rolled the car into the John D. Long Lake. After murdering her own children to win the affections of her new lover, Susan called the police and said she had been carjacked by who? A black man. 9 days later, after the civil rights of countless black Americans had been violated in the search for the perpetrator, Susan confessed to murdering her own children, stating she was only trying to kill herself and take her kids out of the game with her. Smith was found guilty of 2 counts of murder and sentenced to life in prison. She will be eligible, though, for parole after serving 30 years. And we come next to the last scenario. On August 28th, 2001, Iowa State University student Katie Robb, waiting at a bus stop, reported she was kidnapped at gunpoint at 11 a.m. in front of Gilman Hall, one of the busiest areas on campus. She said that 4 black men raped her in a wooded area. The news of the kidnapping and rape by 4 black men made the front pages of Central Iowa newspapers, including the Iowa State Daily and Ames Tribune, and was a top story on regional television news and radio programs. University and local police began looking for any 4 black men driving a sedan who fit the profile. Robb's story proved to be inconsistent, and on August 30th, 2001, Robb admitted that she lied. So why am I reading this to you? And why is it important? It's important because when it comes to being accused of a crime or wrongdoing or being pathological or having some sort of dysfunction, any black man will do. And everybody knows it. Everybody knows it. And brother, truth be told, asked, did Benny go to jail for fitting the description? Yes, he did go to jail, but he was released after it was determined that he was not the actual shooter or killer, but rather the husband Charles was. So there you go. There you have it. And why am I reading this to you? You'll see later on, and you'll see definitely tomorrow, because I want to wrap this up. And what I just basically told to you was 3 scenarios that happened in real life where black men were accused of crimes that white people made up. And why did these white people make it up? Well, because they already know all you have to do is use any old black man as a scapegoat, and the whole community will be alerted and be ready to go and be charged for action. That's why. That's why they said it was a black man who had done it. Now, what I want to do is to let you know that what I actually read was an excerpt from an article called Any 4 Black Men Will Do, or 4 Black Men Will Do, Rape, Race, and the Ultimate Scapegoat. And we all know who the ultimate scapegoat is. It's black men. We're the ultimate scapegoat. And I want to read a little bit more from this article. And it's written by 2 women, an African-American woman and a white woman, just to let you know. There's some things that I agree with in the article, and there's some things I don't agree with in the article. And it's an academic article. So let me just start the process of reading it, and you'll see what I agree with and what I disagree with. And what I'm going to do tomorrow is connect it not only to interracial ideals about black men and their propriety and their character, but also intraracially, and how the same tropes and the same narratives are used against black men by people from our own community. The scapegoating narrative is already there, so all anyone has to do is utilize it, and they can gain sympathy, they can get arrest, and they can cause all sorts of vindictiveness to come to fruition. It's just the facts about black male life. It is what it is. But having said that, let me go to the screen that I want to go to. And hopefully you can see that with no issues, no problems. So the article, again, is entitled, Any Four Black Men Will Do, Rape, Race, and the Ultimate Scapegoat. And this is the second page of the article. I'm going to start there. So it says, although the crime of murder and false accusation of rape are vastly different, the one common thread in these three examples is that each situation involved the interdependence of criminal scapegoating and race. In each example, black men were accused of crimes they did not commit. As we have seen in the aforementioned examples, the use of blacks. Now, this is the first issue I take umbrage with. It's the first issue I take umbrage with. Already, as Dr. Tia San Johnson states, if it's something wrong that the outside group is doing to black men, everybody claims that it impacts them. It's a black thing now. It's not a black male thing. It's a black thing. Not a black male thing, just a general flat black thing. That's why he refers to the concept of flat blackness. And here's a perfect example of it in academic literature. The use of blacks. But we already know that predominantly the scapegoating of black men is the predominant type of phenomena. So this is why I take umbrage with that. But if, I stay stuck there, I'll be stuck here forever. So anyway, they say, as we have seen in the aforementioned examples, the use of blacks as convenient scapegoats for white crimes is not new. Unfortunately, this historical trend is woven into current culture. And they say that this article specifically addresses the Katie Robb incident at ISU. And they say the focus is not on why Robb concocted a story that had devastating consequences on rape survivors, African-American men and women. Now notice who they put in the middle of that. Notice who they put in the middle of that. Thank you, BGS Hipmore. Appreciate your donation, brother. Appreciate that. Notice who they put smack dab in the middle of it. It's not something that has devastating consequences primarily for men, but also, and let me explain something to you, man. This is how feminist scholarship or female or gynocentric scholarship takes place. Not to say that there's no truth here, but there's always an emphasis on them, how it impacts or affects them. Hardly, if ever, is there just the mere mentioning of how it impacts and affects us. It always has to be circled back around to how it impacts and affects them. It's always them, because to them, they're more important than anything else in their own worlds. Who gives a fuck if we spend 30 years in prison? Who gives a damn if we get murdered or killed? Who cares if our reputations are ruined or destroyed? The only thing that matters, really, to be perfectly honest, are the rape survivors and women. Straight up. We're just in there to provide as a prop. And it pisses me off, man. This really actually gets my blood pressure rolling. Anyway, they go on to say, rather, this article critically examines the communicative impact Robb's falsified claims of rape had on these three groups. Again, like I said before, man, the issue that I have is that everybody is worried about how what directly happens to black men impacts them indirectly. It's almost as if fuck us and the real live direct pain that we're feeling. It has to circle back to them. Always, man. Always, always, and forever, man. Always and forever circling back to them. And then you wonder why there's a space such as the Black Manosphere and why you have academicians in it and people who are corporate in it and people who are blue collar in it. And then they wonder why. Shout out to Extended Clips, man. Appreciate the donation, man. Also, shout out to Papa Didas, bro. Appreciate the contribution, sir. Real talk. People are always wondering, like, why is there a space like this? Because everybody's talking about what happens to us and how it impacts them, but we have little representation directly about how it happens to us and what we think and how we feel about it. So anyway, the focus is not on why the woman concocted the story, but on how there are devastating consequences to rape survivors, African-American men, and women. Even though you got women participating in the shit. Women involved in it. And implicit within the whole concept of rape survivors, I guarantee you, is primarily female rape survivors. I guarantee it. I know this. Anyway, they go on to say, using Barthus's theory of myth coupled with textual analysis and 17 student interviews, we examine rape and race issues through a macro context and a micro context lens. Numerous scholars have examined the issue of rape. And let me make this a full screen just on it. Numerous scholars have examined the issue of rape. However, researchers have neglected to study the effect of false rape charges. Now that I agree with. In fact, there are almost no consequences or any effects related to false rape charges. Everybody else just resumes business as usual. Life is business as usual. There's nothing there. You hear very little reporting about it and almost little to no punishment for it. So why not do it? If there's no punishment, there's no consequences for it, why not engage in the practice? Researchers have neglected to study the effect of false rape charges, the interdependence of race and rape, and the impact of the charges in small white-dominated communities. Our focus, or rather their focus, is on Rob's lie about being raped by 4 black men in Ames, Iowa, a small, nearly all-white community, which allows us to look at these issues. Specifically, they focus on the mythology or mythological constructions of rape and race, and their enduring legacy is demonstrated through this Katie Robb case study. Through Rob's concocted story about being raped, she revived the myth of white womanhood as innocent and helpless against the black violent brute who desires to rape white women. In this article, we examine how Rob revived this myth of rape, the impact this revival had on ISU and the local community, how the campus police perpetuated this myth through its investigation, and how the media supported this myth by not challenging it when Rob admitted she lied. So even when people know you're lying, they still perpetuate the myth. Even when it's all said and done and the man is exonerated, the myth persists. On a micro level, we argue that racism and sexism were allowed to continue in this situation because of the preservation of white hegemonic patriarchal power. Now, I don't know exactly where the implications lead, but racism and sexism, I guarantee you she's not making mention of the sexism directed towards black men. I guarantee you she's not making a reference to the sexism being directed towards black men. We already covered this earlier this month. Let me tell you what racism actually is, primarily. And I said this before. It is a form of anti-misandric aggression directed towards outgroup men. Again, I'm not saying that black women or any outgroup women are not impacted by racism. I think that they are. However, racism's most aggressive, lethal, deadly effects are felt by the male population, the outgroup male population. And when that's finally admitted, and when that's actually taken seriously, we can begin to do some work directed at how to combat the impact and the effect of racism. But as it stands, all we have now is intersectionality, which, by the way, I'll talk about and discuss tomorrow. But in my viewpoint, letting the cat out of the bag, all intersectionality does is borrow from the same kind of tropes in the mythology perpetuated by people like Rob, and they apply it intraracially without taking accountability and responsibility for the pathology and the dysfunction that's impacting the black community by actions committed by black women. These are the facts. It's not like these people are pure and innocent, they goddamn selves. But we get scapegoated for everything. And then you got a whole bunch of quislings and simps out there, maggles if you want to call them that, who basically just buy into the whole myth. And then they try to live up to some sort of standard of chivalry predicated upon being some sort of corporate hack. I'm just sick of this stupid shit, man. Black people got to think better. We got to start thinking differently. Anyway, they go into another section called the review of rape and race. And I think they say some things that are true here. One of the greatest myths about rape is that it is primarily a crime committed by black men against white women. This racist myth has its roots in slavery and emancipation. Since slavery, black sexuality has been stereotyped as wild, uncontrollable, bestial, and even criminal. These stereotypes have reinforced the beliefs that white women must be protected from black men. Interracial relationships between black and white individuals in the U.S. date back to the 1600s. Wherever there were slaves and free blacks, interracial relationships occurred. In the colonies of Maryland and Virginia, both males and females involved in racial mixing were publicly punished. You had castrations. Now, no women weren't castrated. They might have been flogged and whipped, but they probably weren't lynched. We know who the castrations were reserved for. You had fines, servitude, and or jail sentences which were imposed when interracial sexual contact was discovered. In the 1700s, as plantation slavery spread and large numbers of black slaves were moved into the cotton and rice growing areas, ownership of a female slave included owning her sex life. Rapes occurred frequently, and many slave owners harshly punished slaves who would not submit. Large numbers of white boys were socialized to associate physical and emotional pleasure with the black women who nursed and raised them, and then were forced to deny any deep feelings for them. Some researchers claim that black women were initiators of relationships. Whoa! Dig that. Some researchers claim that black women were initiators of relationships, and others claim it was rape when slave owners had relationships with their female slaves. Some sexual relationships between black men and white women appear to have been consensual. But now, if that's the case, think about it, bruh. If you have consensual sexual relationships between black men and white women, You think that there were no consensual relationships between black women and white men? Come on now. Come on, man. So black men can be slaves and have consensual sex with white women, but black women can be slaves and not have consensual sex. That's at least how it's implied. Otherwise, why put the qualifier in there? It's almost as if black men didn't have non-consensual sex with white women, like it was always just something we wanted. That's what I don't like about this, man. That's what I don't like about it. Anyway, some sexual relationships between blacks who are men and white women appear to have been consensual, but in the 1800s, this type of relationship became dangerous for both parties because of the beliefs and stereotypes surrounding cross-racial romantic relationships. Although F. Davis noted that sexual contact between white and slaves was tolerated until the number of white women in the colony increased significantly, the uneasy tolerance once given for sexual relationships between black men and white women quickly changed to violent intolerance once blacks gained their freedom. So we're talking about the emancipatory era, right? Southern white patriarchs challenged the sexual relationships between black men and white women by claiming that such relations would destroy the white race. The ferocious responses to unions of black men and white women that have become a cliche of Southern honor, the lynchings, the castrations, the pathological obsession with black rapists, date mostly from the Civil War period and onward. During the early years of Reconstruction, slavery was replaced by lethal violence to control the activities of the freed blacks, including sexual agency. According to McLean, white Americans, primarily in the South, had the belief that black men had an incorrigible desire to rape white women. This led to whites referring to rape as the new Negro crime. The new Negro crime created the mythology that black men rape white women. The creation and perpetuation of this myth of the new Negro crime stems from Klansmen who used women as markers in symbolic power plays between men. And this is important here. White men use sex with black women as a way to humiliate black men by demonstrating their lack of social power and ability to protect their women. You heard all the rap music about, I fucked your wife, I fucked your girl, I fucked your wife, I fucked your girl, and all of this. It's the same mentality, bro. It's trying to get at another man's psyche by saying he had intercourse with something that you hold dear. Your wife. Or I had sex with your daughter and you couldn't do nothing about it. It's the same sort of mentality, if you ask me. White men use sex with black women as a way to humiliate black men. Klansmen, conscious of their tradition of using women as a tool for power, soon realized that black men could also do this. Their fear of a subordinate using this technique to gain power helped create the idea of the black rapist. I've said this before on my show. We already know, like, if we start talking about rape culture, slavery in and of itself is rape culture. And it also leads to a lot of freakiness and Stockholm syndrome on the behalf of black men, black women, and a whole host of irascible characters in the black community. But to argue that it only happened to black women, even to only suggest that it's a phenomenon that occurs to black women specifically, and to leave out men in general is, to me, irresponsible. It's absolutely irresponsible. Shout out to 77 Base X, man. He says they're perpetuating the same myths they're supposed to be opposing. Yes. And then she gives a bunch of statistics. The Federal Bureau of Investigation's Uniform Crime Report found that 62% of arrestees for forcible rape were white. Tell that to your divester crowd. Where the divestors at? Y'all tuned in tonight? It's Chad and Brad doing most of the forcible raping. And I am using that word a lot tonight, but I don't care. It's the historical reality of American culture and society. One that everybody wants to conveniently forget as they make woke movies and shit and got woke television programs. It's the history that everybody conveniently forgets when it comes time to talk about real social justice in America. We just rather have a bunch of MCU movies with female characters in the place of male ones. Like that's the new justice movement. That's the new movement. That's the new woke culture here. Anyway, this is a so-called 12% increase from the 1995 report. The U.S. Department of Justice, Bureau of Justice Statistics reports that 55.8% of arrestees for rape were white. Research also indicates that most reported cases of rape are intra-racial, not interracial. South and Felsen noted that black rapists are no more likely to choose a white woman than white rapists are to choose a black woman. In fact, their evidence suggests that black rapists are less likely to target white women. A 2001 report from the Bureau of Justice Statistics supported 1993 and 1998 results showing that 76% of rapes and sexual assaults for whites are intraracial and 85.8% for blacks. So you know what that means? It means more white guys are having sex forcibly with women outside of their own so-called racial group. But we already knew that though, didn't we? We already know this. So tell that to the divestors about the ones out here really getting down and dirty and being the ones they suspect and, basically purport to be so refined and civilized. Where the divestors at? And this is the article written by two women, one black one and a white one, Ebony and Ivory, together in perfect harmony. But despite the statistical evidence, judges and juries tend to impose harsher penalties for the rape of white women. Black men who rape white women receive the longest and most severe punishments. Duh. For example, regarding violent offenses in 2000, and violent offenses include rape, sexual assault, robbery, and assault, but not murder or manslaughter, African Americans served about 2 years longer, 8.6 years than whites. 7 years, and Hispanics, 6.3 years. Another major myth about rape is that women often fabricate rape stories of or cry rape because of regret or revenge. Now, I just don't agree with that at all. I think that is some bullshit. You saying women don't often fabricate the whole story? But you telling a story right now, your whole paper is about a myth that has been perpetuated and developed in the bowels and the entrails of American race culture. But it it doesn't really happen. And then who do you cite as an authority on it? None other than a racist academician, Susan Brown Miller, man. Come on, man. You can't make a reference to Susan Brown Miller. Really? And black men have to read this, and if they're not hip to the game and they don't understand the kind of narratives being spun here, they'll just let it pass. So you're saying women don't lie about it? There's nothing, women don't often fabricate the shit because they regret it or they want to get back at somebody about it? That means they're not human, huh? This is how you get Me Too and Believe Her, bro. This is how we get here. Anyway, they say this notion of false accusation began in the late 19th century when violence against interracial sexual relationships had escalated. Duh. Just imagine how vulnerable you are as a black man. And if a white woman, let's say, for example, she wants to have sex with you, which they did to slaves all the time. What, are you going to refuse her? And then what does she do? She'll threaten you if you refuse. I'll tell on you anyway. What are you going to do? And let me point out something before I even move forward. Let me point out something before I even move forward, man. Because there's a lot of people out there who are so dedicated to the narrative that women are the most vulnerable people as it pertains to sexual assault. Oh, we're so vulnerable. I'm not saying you're not vulnerable. I got the male rape information sheet drawn up by Dr. Tia Johnson. And it's entitled The Male Rape Information Sheet, Contrasting Dominant Stereotypes. And it was made, again, tabulated by Dr. Tia Johnson. And it basically, the first point on it is 2.78 million men in the U.S. have been victims of sexual assault or rape. RAINN.org. Get information, statistics, sexual assault victims. Go look it up. One thing that black male scholars do is they have evidence for their claims, and they can point to data sets in order to demonstrate empirical claims, to support and buttress the empirical claims that they actually do make. Point number two, from 1930 to 2012, the FBI defined forcible rape for data collecting purposes as the carnal knowledge of a female forcibly and against her will. Eventually, localities began to rebel against that limited gender-bound definition. In 2010, Chicago reported 86,767 cases of rape, but used its own broader definition. So the FBI left out the Chicago stats. Finally, in 2012, the FBI revised its definition and focused on penetration with no mention of female or force. Although helpful, this definition still ignores made to penetrate situations for males. See below. Number three, a recent analysis of BJS statistics, that's the Bureau of Justice Statistics, turned up that 46% of male victims reported a female perpetrator. Point number four, 1 out of every 4 black men and black women have experienced rape, physical violence, and stalking by an intimate partner in a lifetime. Number 5, in a survey by Stemple and Meyer, women were more likely to be abused by fellow female inmates and men by guards, and many of those guards were female. Number 6, of juveniles reporting staff sexual misconduct, 89% were boys reporting abuse by female staff members. In total, inmates reported an astronomical 900,000 incidents of sexual abuse. That's the story that don't get told. It's all about the women's and what happens to them. As if this is a phenomenon that doesn't happen to men. And an extreme racial power dynamics played out directly after slavery and during it. You don't think that false allegations were made and forcible rape was perpetrated against black men? Come on, man. Number 7, Centers for Disease Control invented the category of sexual violence called being made to penetrate. This is the CDC, right? This definition includes victims, male and female, who were forced to penetrate someone else with their own body parts or a foreign item, either by physical force or coercion, or when the victim was drunk or high or otherwise unable to consent. When those cases were taken into account, the rates of non-consensual sexual contact basically equalized, with 1.270 million women and 1.267 million men claiming to be victims of sexual violence. Come on, man. Come on, man. What was the ultimate CDC finding? It was that women rape men as often as men rape women. Boom. But they don't never tell that story in their papers, though. They just want to make a point about how, anti-black misandry has an impact on real rape survivors and women. That's what this article is about to me, man. It ain't really got shit to do with the black men. It's about how it impacts women and rape survivors who are women. That's what it has to do with, man. But they use us as a prop. Fuck what we going through with this phenomenon. I'm not saying that all together, though, but I mean, come on, man. Why put everybody else in there? All up in the mix. Everybody got something to gain out of our tragedies but us. Everybody gets to express what happens related to tragedies directed towards us and how it impacts or affects them. But when it comes to how it directly impacts and affects us, then they got very little to say. I can go on, man. Ultimately, man, a fact, I don't want to read 9, not that it's unimportant, but yeah, let me read 9. The CDC also reports that men account for over a third of those experiencing another form of sexual violence, which is sexual coercion, defined as being pressured into sexual activity by psychological means, by lies, by false promises. You don't think black men were subjected to that shit during slavery and during Jim Crow? Threats to end the relationship or to spread negative gossip or making repeated requests for sex and expressing unhappiness at being turned down. As criminologists Richard Felsen and Patrick Cundiff report in a fascinating recent analysis, a 15-year-old male is considerably more likely to be sexually assaulted than a 40-year-old woman. The CDC reports that 12.3% of female victims were 10 or younger at the time of their first completed rape victimization. For male victims, that number is 27.8%. When you add up made to penetrate cases, rape by the newer FBI definition, and prison sexual assault rape statistics, men, statistically black men especially, experience rape at much higher rates than women annually. But yet and still we get scapegoated for being the aggressors. Don't you see that there's a problem here? Don't you think that this is an issue here? And then she uses Susan Brown Miller, man. Oh my God, bro. Man. Anyway, then she goes on in these women go on in the next paragraph to talk about statistics related to false accusations. Just as in the past, today the actual number of false accusations remains in question. Oh, we don't know. Various reports list false reports of rape as low as 2 to 3%, similar to rates of other violent crimes. Then she cites Susan Brown Miller again, and the National Sheriff's Association. Or as high as 40 to 50%. The discrepancy in these statistics may simply be due to the fact that these were different studies on different populations at different times. Whatever, man. According to Heather Priest, false reports of any type of assault are not well researched. Why? Because there's no punishment for them. There's no punishment for it. Okay, dear, go back to business as usual. Oh, you accused the guy you almost destroyed his life? Oh, so much. Well, you silly woman. Go back to business as usual. The SART, which basically is short for the Sexual Assault Response Team Coordinator, SART estimates the number of false reports in Iowa are less than 1%. Bullshit. Bullshit. In fact, sexual assault is one of the most underreported crimes in relation to the actual incidents, especially for black men or men in general, because men aren't even taught that they're undergoing some sort of sexual assault. The culture only talks about women in relation to this issue and how they're impacted or affected by it. So this paper basically has the gall, not to say that maybe they have blinders on, or blind spots on, but think about it. You have situations where men, particularly black men, are vulnerable to sexual assault and coercion. And we got to talk about women as a whole, though, and black women. And how it impact the false accusations against black men and sexual coercion of black men really actually impacts them. But they're just talking about the accusations, though. For those who do make false accusations, the repercussions affect more than the claimant. Really? I told you this is where this is going. False accusations serve to reinforce the blaming the victim explanation, thereby increasing the probability that women will not report a rape, and authorities, friends, and the community at large will disbelieve those who do report a sexual assault. Now, I don't have a problem with this all the way, but what I do have a problem with is to purely put rape and sexual assault in men's laps. You're scapegoating men. And you're not talking about the pathology related to women according to not only accusation, but sexual assault itself. And to me, I find that morally reprehensible because I know that these motherfucking women have the data at their fingertips. I know these women have this data at their fingertips. And I can go into and get into all of the rest of the article, but I'm already at an hour. And I don't expect to be doing this a whole hell of a lot. Okay, not tonight. But the point is, if these kind of accusations are levied at black men on a regular basis, and if the myth is really actually predicated in patriarchy, as they say, white patriarchy, I mean, or is she letting white women off the hook for engaging in the phenomenon? Are these women doing that? Are they basically letting white women off the hook for the shit? So white men just basically forced these white women to engage in the practice, which led to the lynching of black men. I want you to reflect on that for a minute. It almost seems that everybody is culpable. It always goes back to the patriarchy. It never goes to the women. It goes to the white patriarchy because, relationships with men were like discouraged and white men just basically force this down white women's throats. Like white women didn't get a kick out of having power in this regard. This is what I have an issue with, man. And not only is this, let me tell you what patriarchy is again, because I don't like the new jack, the second wave concept of patriarchy, which is based on Marxian classifications. All they do is they put men in the category of the bourgeoisie, they put women into the category of the proletariat, and they say that there's patriarchal power and all men possess it, and all women are impacted by it. But what about black men? What about black men who are impacted by this shit? And on top of that, also being subjected to sexual assault and sexual coercion that nobody wants to pay attention to. The only thing they're worried about is the impact the false accusations have, or the narrative of false accusations has on real survivors. As if they're the only real survivors here. Any four black men will do, or any black man will do. All you got to do is say a black man. You commit a crime, just say a black man did it. The whole community be on like a lynch alert in order to get the nigger. You already know how the story goes. But this question is the one I want to pose to you. And I want you to answer it with a simple yes or no. Is it the case that this narrative about the black male rapist, abuser, and savage, is it also utilized by members in our own community, so to speak, the community? Is it not also utilized by black women intraracially? Is it yes or is it no? Chime in. Is this myth also perpetuated by people within the community? And if so, why is no one talking about it? Why has there never been a discussion about it? Why is there no research on it? Why is no one saying anything about it? Why is no one saying anything about it? To even mention or to have these kind of discussions is something that really irks a lot of people in this culture. It runs against the narrative of the woke mob. And it puts us at risk. To even talk about it, to even have a discussion, to even express it, draws the ire of ideologues and so-called manly men who want to provide and protect. Or at least purport to want to do so. To be perfectly honest, I think most of the motherfuckers, especially on YouTube, trying to sell products and services and shit. Protect your woman. Here's how you do it. Let me show you an instrument that I have and a service I can provide you with. Yes, I'm talking about Boyce Watkins. Let me show you an instrument I can use. Buy this service. Do what BGS say, man. Support your scholar, bruh. Because I'm going to tell you like this. Real talk. They will ban you. They will ostracize you. They will try to cancel you. They will flag you. They will try to do everything they can to silence you. Then they'll start telling you, well, it's not exactly what you're saying. It's the way that you're saying it. The same bullshit they tried to pull on Kevin Samuels about his tone. Well, we don't really take an issue with what you're saying. It's just we don't like the way you're saying it. So all this shit happening to our population, our demographic, we just supposed to just be real nice about it. That's what we're supposed to do. Given the statistics and the empirical data, we supposed to just sit on this and not be pissed off and not upset and to not say shit. So we already know that there's a myth out there that we're abusers and savages. And then you got people within our own community who are utilizing this narrative, divestors and a whole bunch of the ilk, who are using it in order to draw out and to perpetuate the stereotypes and the caricatures. And we come out here and say these things, and then we get canceled. I got banned on Facebook. I used to stream on Facebook and YouTube. They told me my streaming privileges are no longer allowed. You're no longer permitted to do live streams on Facebook. Anyway, man, if you got any questions, man, about what I just presented to you and why it's important at all, chime in. If you don't chime in, I'm about to get the hell up on out of here, and I'll finish this up tomorrow. Because what I want to do is to demonstrate the yes, indeed, any black man will do, and everybody knows it. And in the academy, you have a plethora of black women who are utilizing the same narratives, and it has the same impact and effect on black men, and they draw none of the responsibility back on themselves. None. Because the sheet that I showed you, that Dr. Johnson has, that demonstrates that a lot of sexual coercion is going on against boys and men, and in particular black men, they don't mention any of that shit in their scholarship at all. I've yet to see a paper written by one of them to talk about that. I'm still waiting for that. Appreciate your support, Jason Jamal. I'm still waiting on that. And I'm still waiting on the data from a credible source that demonstrates that all of this shit is happening to women. And ain't none of it happening to men. It's just all male perpetrators. We got CDC statistics. We got FBI statistics. Where are your statistics? Where are your numbers? Where are you drawing your data set from? Black pill, red pill. Let me explain something to you. And let me explain it clearly. You got to go back and watch the last two shows I did, but for the sake of brevity and simplicity, I'll just say it again. Racism in and of itself is first and foremost manifested and exemplified as anti-black misandry if you're talking about black on white racism. It's primarily a form of misandric aggression. The most lethal effects of racism accrue to male populations of outgroup men. Again, I'm not saying that women are not from the outgroup are not impacted by racism, but its most lethal effects are directed or targeted towards the male population. These are the facts. And what they also leave out is sexual assault about the outgroup population. The male population never gets discussed, gets swept under the rug in order to perpetuate the whole concept that sexual assault is something that happens to women only because of, quote unquote, the patriarchy. And then you wonder why there's a space like the Black Manosphere that men can actually talk about it without having to be fettered by mainstream news outlets that basically want to curb and reel you in and tell you how you should and how you should not speak. As if this is something you should just sit down and, cerebrally take in without having any kind of emotive reaction at all. No, arousal of anger or ire or contempt or frustration. You're supposed to just sit back and take this shit and let it go in and absorb it and be like, well, I'm stoic and objective about it, impartial. I'm not moved at all. All I want to do is provide and protect. Oh, forget what happened to me. Oh, well, we just got to just keep our mouths shut and just provide and protect. Thank you, Ghetto Houser. Or Ghetto User. That's what Ghetto User 49. Appreciate that, bro. I don't know why I keep calling you Ghetto Houser, but it's just the way your name is, or your username is, the way it looks when it's blended together. But Ghetto User 49, appreciate the donation. And appreciate Mantis on break with the $5 donation. Appreciate that, sir. Appreciate that. And this ain't to, basically say all women are this or all men are that. All I'm saying is, and all I've ever said from the beginning, and any reasonable academician should be able to see this if they're not an ideologue, that pathology, dysfunction, immorality, viciousness, vice, corruption is happening by all people in the black community or any other community for that matter. It's not something that is just carried out by men because of the fucking patriarchy. which to me, they don't even have an adequate definition of what patriarchy is. Because they use Marxian classifications and taxonomic, heuristics in order to do it, and that shit doesn't work. Black Pill, what's going on, man?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. What's going on?
I decided to call in because I realized I couldn't quite articulate my question, text limit. What I was asking earlier in the chat was more in regards to how you were mentioning, with sexual assault. Because as you pointed out, men and women have similar rates, and women are more equal opportunists. They tend to attack men and women equally, but regarding the stereotype of the rapist, you would think, if we were being honest about the metrics, that women would typically get more of that stereotype because they're given lower sentences and more protections when they do it. So, that's kind of where I got the idea of asking about if the rapist stereotype was tied to just being a man, or if it was tied to because you're a black man. Does that make sense?
It does. And again, here's my answer to the question. If you understand racism by means of looking at genocide studies and looking at the historical archive, you will find that the most lethal effects of racism are directed towards the outgroup. And of course, if you're talking about blacks and whites, if you got a predominant group of people who are in control of a culture, right? In this case, white folks, right? They're going to direct the most lethal effects of racism at the male population. And again, as I said, it's not as if racist expression and racist targeting doesn't happen to, for example, the black female population. But when you look at the lynchings, like look at the historical archive, who was lynched the most? Was it black men or black women?
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize you were pausing for me. Black men, yes.
If you look at police killings, extrajudicial police killings, who's killed more? Is it black men or black women?
By individual population size, it would be black men, but by total demographic size, especially when going by per encounter rate, it would be white men.
Of course, like the larger numbers are white men, but when you're talking about proportions, per capita, right? Black men are 2.3 times more likely to die of a police assault than are white men.
Yes, so but black men are 3 times more likely to encounter police. So that would mean the disparity would be white men are per capita killed more than black men per encounter. But that also begs the question of how many are legitimate police reports in the first place. So,
But the point is, why are black men encountering the police so much? One of the reasons why is because we're overly surveilled. We're overly characterized as being a suspect in a commission of a crime. Like the whole discipline of criminology was created in the middle of the 20th century. And much of it, in my estimation, is extremely racist based upon the subculture of violence theory, which I will discuss and talk about briefly tomorrow. But think about this. You have the formation of the United States as a country over the course of 4 centuries. I mean, the first settlers came over here in the 1600s, and then you had subsequent populations of people moved, other populations, acts of genocide and war were, committed in order to finalize and put an exclamation point on the colonial project. But think about it. But you can't classify it as crime because it's not crime, right? Unless you have judicial institutions established, right? Or do you believe that there's something that's objectively criminal about committing acts of genocide and rape within the context of slave-based culture? See, it's convenient to start at time T2, forget what happened between time T1 and T2, and just look at time T2 to T3 and to point the finger at black folks who, by the way, everyone polices. It's part of the American pastime. Let's find a way to police these guys. They're suspicious, those guys. And we actually know, and the statistics bear this out, most of the guys doing the raping, 62% of them are white guys. They've been raping people since they fucking founded the country. I'm not trying to be ignorant by saying this. It's just an empirical and a statistical fact. If you're a slave, what can you do if your master wants to bust it wide open? Okay, what can you say? And it wasn't just women who were subjected to sexual threat and coercion. Men were also subjected to the same sort of sexual coercion and had to, basically be subjected to the same kind of sexual threat as black women in the United States. So that's why I say it's convenient to look at the numbers and to say, well, in terms of, white guys, I'm not saying white guys don't experience fucked up shit. I think they do. And especially in this culture right now, I think it's an anti-misandric culture. And I think that's partially responsible because of the lopsided and the one-sided kind of scholarship going on in the academy right now. But
the term is called gynocentrism. Not just anti-misandry, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's definitely gynocentric. We call it the gynocracy over in this part of the woods. We call it gynocracy. But much of it is grounded upon erroneous and misleading claims, incomplete half-truths directed about what happens to them as women. And look, I don't have a problem with women telling their truth and exposing their issues. But you can't be a serious scholar and just talk about only your issues and leave out the fact that women are also doing this shit.
Exactly. That's kind of what got me to ask the question, because women are, 70% of the killers of children, and then their abuse rates are way higher than men. And then you have what I was trying to bring up in the comments before with the Duluth model, where 38 states will automatically arrest men in the case of domestic dispute. It's insane how people think that, men are the privileged gender here, And
people, and look, hey, Pookie, wait up, man. So look, Ellen Pence and Michael Pamer are the persons who developed the whole Duluth model to begin with, okay? And look, I don't have a problem with women having an issue with domestic violence. However, I have a problem with women, especially this Ellen Pence character, who basically fabricated the entire narrative surrounding domestic violence. And she basically details how she did it in an article called Some Thoughts on Philosophy in an academic journal called Coordinating Community Responses to Domestic Violence, which was published, I think, in 1998. And in that article, she details how she used the concept of Christian guilt, not predicated upon any kind of empirical data whatsoever, but only borrowing from patriarchy theory in order to demonstrate that domestic violence is a phenomenon that occurs and has its source primarily as men wanting to exert power and control over women. And then any research that's used to demonstrate or to utilize that this is not something that's just one-sided, it's something that's often reciprocal, and that women also initiated or instantiate acts of violence more so than men. Nobody wants to have conversations about that.
Exactly.
And I find that highly problematic. So yes, do we live in a gynocentric culture? Yes. But the problem is this culture expects for men to endure abuse and have no response to it, especially and particularly from women. But the problem is, you're talking about the destruction of reputations, You're talking about the destruction of livelihoods and generational wealth. You're talking about cancelization from professions. And you're talking about potentially losing money and incarceration
don't
predicated upon, go ahead.
Don't forget the financing of child kidnapping, as we see with Japan being a common sinkhole for people to take their kids when they want child support for life.
Well, hey, all I can say is, all I want to do is tell the truth. I don't have a, if you want to, my whole viewpoint has been from the beginning and the outset. I'm not here to tell lies. I'm not here to tell half truths. I'm here to tell all of the truth. Because the devil doesn't necessarily lie. The devil only espouses parts of the truth without exposing the entirety of the picture. Now, I've always been told if I go to the dentist and I have a cavity, that it's important to drill out the entirety of the cavity in the tooth. That you don't leave parts of the cavity in it if you want to actually remedy the ailment called the cavity itself. You want to drill out all of it and fill it in and polish it and coat it, and then the malady is repaired. But what we're doing is we're talking about a health problem in the entire population of the United States and only directing it to one demographic based upon gender ideals developed in the context of quackery studies, man. And I don't have a problem with women having their own studies programs, have them. But at least tell the truth in them all the way. Don't tell part of the truth in them, tell the whole fucking truth in them.
If they only told the truth, their studies wouldn't exist.
Well, that's a whole nother issue and a question right there. But we have something to counter that. It's called black male studies. And black male studies is not predicated upon lies and half-truths. It's predicated upon utilizing methods of falsification, the same kind of methodology that's supposed to be utilized in social scientific research, devoid of ideology and implicit bias. I've always said this, I'm going to say this in the end. Black men are the canary of the coal mine in this culture. When everybody else has got a cold, we got COVID-19. We got the fucking flu. And at the same time that these issues are occurring to us, these problems are happening to us, we're being told to be quiet and don't say shit about it. Don't talk, don't be quiet. That's you're toxic. You're engaging in the patriarchy. You need to be, I'm like, fuck that. I'm going to speak my mind and speak my piece. And I don't mean disrespect to anybody, but if we're going to try to find a way to deal with the pathology and the entirety of our community and in the country and in homes or whatever the case may be, we got to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Exactly. And more on your point about the black community kind of being, the guinea pig who catches things first. I also noticed that regarding single motherhood, the child support system, the welfare state, and also the criminality cases. Because I'm not sure if you've already covered this. I'm not able to catch your show every time, but kids from single mothers end up having the highest crime rates across the board, highest dropout rates, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I've noticed that also even the transgender thing kind of started with black kids first and then started moving into the rest of the country. So I've noticed that, a lot of these problems started in the black community, and kind of what got me to pay so much attention to what's going on your side of the field,
Well, again, if black men got a cold, everybody, if everybody else got a cold, black men got the flu. And, I've had shows, I've done numerous shows that details the origin of the fracture and the fissures in family relationships in the black community. And there are many men here who know it. We've explored it from a variety of different perspectives. I mean, not all of us are in agreement. This is not a cohesive, homogeneous ideological group. It's a heterogeneous public in which people express their ideas and opinions and allow the forceless force of the greater argument to hold sway. That's what we do. Now, I can't, say whether or not transgenderism started because of black men or black
No,
women
no,
or
no, no.
whatever the
You
case may be?
misunderstand. You misunderstand. I'm not saying it started with black men. I'm saying I noticed that it started in the black communities, and like woke people started trying to push trans kids and all that stuff on black kids first. Does that make
Well,
sense?
yeah,
Sir Pookie, go ahead, get your viewpoints in, brother. And anybody, look, I left the link is up. I'm willing to go a little bit longer. I didn't expect to be here, for 4 hours, but I'll give it a good 2 if somebody wants to step in and make a statement or present an idea. Go ahead, Pookie.
okay. And I just wanted to say, in terms of the whole the trans movement just in general. Yes, there. I mean, yes, it was. I guess you could say it's been popularized by our community, but that actually has roots in the white hippie community and from the female empowerment movements from the '60s and
Yep.
'70s. That's where the original roots and the
Yep.
original credits.
But I think look, ultimately, I kind of believe what Judah Jr. is saying here to some extent.
Yeah, that's what
Namely,
I
namely
said it was
that
popularized.
yeah. So you got what happens is the left will take a mascot, a minority group within a minority group from the black population, and amplify claims of victimization by brutal black men in order to push a specific kind of narrative. You saw this same narrative being utilized by Black Lives Matter in order to bolster, awareness and attention to black trans women. And my viewpoint on it is, how the fuck, that's a bait and switch. You got black men being killed extrajudicially in the streets 2 times the rate, to 3 times the rate of the average population, and we got a problem and an issue with it. And then all of a sudden, we got to talk about black trans women now and the erosion of the family. Even though we know that results in disastrous, consequences for black boys. Now, it doesn't impact black girls as much as it impacts black boys. The fissure and the fracture of black family life without men being present.
On the topic of Black Lives Matter, do you remember back when they had I forget how they worded it, but they were basically trying to imply that they wanted the abolition of the black father from the family. Do you remember that?
They don't think we're necessary. They have alternative
Exactly.
models, but the alternative models work for them. And they know this. They know the research and the data on this. I just did a show not too long ago on the downward mobility of black boys. And it seems that when it comes to black women, if they come from a middle class family, their trajectory pretty much is such that, there won't be any downward trend. But when it comes to black boys, even in middle class families, there's a downward trend.
Yep. And that also begs the question, if Black Lives Matter doesn't think that black fathers and black men matter, why do they constantly try and propagate them as mascots to get millions of dollars from?
Because to be honest, we have to be realistic about these numbers in terms of the black trans community, which is under 1%, and then going on to black males disproportionately being criminalized and being arrested for drug offenses, and, just violent offenses as well. Even if let's say the numbers to the white community were more proportional, and let's say the white community was being criminalized, at a 54% rate, and the black community was being criminalized at, let's say, a 49 or 47% rate. Logically, it still doesn't make sense why the black population is criminalized and has higher numbers of criminal records and arrest rates coming from a community that only has a male population of 6%, which would be roughly equivalent to 5 to 10 million people, in comparison to what we're talking about, over 75 million white males.
We'll put it this way. There, in the 90s and up to the 2000s, I don't know if this stat rings true now as it did then, but you had more black men in prison in the United States than you had women in prisons throughout the entirety of the fucking world.
There's multiple factors.
And primarily, they were in jail for non-violent drug offenses. And
Thanks, Biden.
we already know that black people don't use drugs to any degree greater than any other population in the United States. And in fact, I have empirical data that will demonstrate that white people use more drugs, harder drugs than black people. Cocaine, methamphetamine, heroin, to a greater and larger extent than black folks. However, if you want to create crime, all you have to do is surveil a particular population, make the arrest. There's your data right there. Which comes first, the chicken or the egg?
Exactly.
If you want to remedy the racial problems in the United States, then what you have to do, instead of the woke mob giving all of this lip service to these ideological categories like the men and women and the patriarchy and this Manichaean split that they split the world into, the good versus the bad, the right versus the left, the proletariat versus the bourgeoisie, then what you will do is you will basically begin to lift black men up and to give them, not by giving them gimmies, goodies, and grab-ems, but basically just making sure that black men have access to the same kind of resources that all other men do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the problem is the wealth gap can be traced to slavery to some extent. But the biggest and the most damning impediment to the wealth gap was the leaving out of black men in participation in FHA loans and access to the GI Bill.
Yeah.
Are you sure it didn't follow the welfare state? Because
no, it didn't follow.
When Lyndon B. Johnson's welfare policy passed in his war against poverty, it, like you mentioned earlier, it started with black people. Black women got the exemption of basically you get paid by the state to kick out your man. And then you got to see the explosion of single motherhood across the black population as the longer the policy went and the more goodies got attached to it.
Well, black men.
Let BGS speak. Let BGS speak.
There was a 1983 article, I just went over it, from the New York Times, where the employment, the labor participation rate for white women went from I think it was less than 10% to 48% in 1960 to 48% in 1983. And what they found out is that when white women got jobs, they got their own money, they got their own independence, they followed the same track as black women did. Black women had always been in the labor pool, which is why they didn't want to give black women welfare, the same welfare as white women in the first place. Okay, when they found out, what they found out is that when you give black women and white women the same things, they act in similar ways. It's because culture is actually informed by what? Environment.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you see out of wedlock rates exploding all over the globe. Okay, all right. Let me ask you a question. Out of all the groups in the world, who has the highest out of wedlock birth rate? Do you think it? What do you think? Which country?
The United States.
Nope. Try again. I'll give you one more.
Are you measuring by total population or per capita?
I'm told by percentage.
By percentage, I am not sure.
Okay. You know what a rate is, right? A rate is not total population.
Yes.
Okay, rate is okay. The highest out of wedlock birth rate in the world is Colombia at 85%.
Mm.
It's structural.
And I think that, for the most part, I'm gonna tell you, I think BGS, you done a lot of work on this. Okay, you talk about population boom, the ebb and flow of it, and how it caps off, and how what cultures and nation states have to do in order to replenish this population, and the means by which they go about doing it.
Right.
But here's the thing, right?
Okay.
I think that traditional family structures have been exploded primarily, not just by politics, but by, like you said before, environment and the emergence of new economies, but even bigger than that, by bureaucracy.
True.
Okay? And if you take away, like, when society becomes so successful and you reach the Goldilocks conditions, and there's no danger or threat. See, a lot of women are complaining about how dangerous the world is, but this is one of the safest environments that women have ever lived in throughout the entirety of human history. I mean, these are the facts, right? I mean, we have lit streets. No, there are no longer murders and marauders in mass moving across the highways. Now, I'm not saying that none of that never happens. It does happen, of course. But I mean, the extent to which, trouble and precarity and violence may be enacted upon an individual is minimal related to what it used to be like. Say, for example, during fucking the days when the Vikings were in control, and the Gauls and the Visigoths and the Ostrogoths were in internecine warfare with one another. This is a relatively safe environment.
Yeah, extremely safe.
But I mean, the safer it gets, the more complaints there are made about how unsafe it is.
There's a saying about this. The one who is stuffed is first to criticize the food.
Man,
basically, the more spoiled you are, the more,
of course, yeah,
have nothing else to do.
But I appreciate you for dropping by and being on the panel. I don't know what your identity is, what gender you are, or what you sound like a white person, but I can't take that for granted. But at the end of the day, anybody has the capacity and access to the Green Gorilla channel, provided they are respectful and they actually have an argument to make. You know what I'm saying? So anybody's welcome to come to this motherfucker. You feel me?
Yeah. The issue is that a lot of times these ideas and these theories are not grounded in data, stats, and statistics, and what goes on the ground. Okay, basically, family formation is actually determined by your environment. Okay, a single nuclear family is a relatively new idea in human society, right? So if you build it on nuclear family identity, and the environment is not going to be conducive toward it, it's going to break up. Okay.
Yeah, and I know
that's what's happening to it right now. It's not just breaking up here. You can look at Europe. That would hell, the Nordic countries out of where our birth rate is 60%. It's 55% in Great Britain. Hell, it's 60% in France. It's not the only place. The only place where the out of wedlock birth rate is low is actually these highly autocratic, patriarchal countries like Greece, like China, like South Korea, like Singapore, and Japan. Okay, those are the places where the out of wedlock birth rate is low. It's still low amongst the modern countries. Okay, you take a place like South Africa, right? You wouldn't think, which is patriarchal and is not as advanced. The out of wedlock birth rate is 60%. Why is that? And this is a recent phenomenon. It's not new. Okay, it's not old. It's very recent. For the out of wedlock birth rate in
50 years.
in Colombia, it was 1950 years. In Colombia, it was 1990 out of wedlock birth rate in Colombia was right around maybe 10-15%. Okay, it took 30 years for it to go to 85%. And all if you look at all your Latin American countries, they're highly patriarchal and highly machismo. Okay, they've been altered. Okay, they've been altered in the last 25 years. They all have high out of wedlock birth rates.
And the biggest, the people who receive the biggest detriments related to all of this, of course, are men.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, and this, like Camille Paglia made a statement about this. Like, men are the drivers of culture and civilization. And not to say women don't play their part. I think it's a joint venture. However, I mean, think about the infrastructure of a nation. Who's working and building on that? Think about your great artistic advancements and your great scientific advancements. It's primarily men who are driving that, okay? And what happens when you attenuate the very kind of conditions that give rise to men to do what they can do best?
Yeah.
And then what's going to happen? What's going to happen to your culture? And I mean, and this, like Kevin Samuels is important only because, to me, you see what women desire. They desire to be provided for and protected, and to have things come to them without putting in any fucking work. Like this schizophrenic viewpoint that you're supposed to receive shit from men while offering nothing, not even respect, but to allow yourself to be used like a garden tool. Come on, man. Like, how is this going to work? How is this cultural value system going to work in the future, 50 to 100 years from now?
It's not.
I don't see it as solvent. I just don't.
It's not. because at the end of the day, this value system is based off a lack of understanding, of what it takes to provide a lifestyle like that, where you have a woman that's able to stay at home, and a lack of understanding of actual economics, understanding of self psychology and gender psychology, with to be able to have the wherewithal to understand that at some point I am going to slow down, and the lack of understanding of group human physiology.
Pookie, let me say this to you. I just got hung up on by a woman that I've known for 20 years, maybe. Not yeah, almost 20 years, because we were having this type of conversation, and it got to the point, and yes, we mentioned Kevin, where she hung up in my face because it's not that they don't understand; it's that they don't care. They want it, and they want it now. I came on to back up what Green Gorilla was saying, and kind of go more in depth about the idea that you live in a society that's safe enough and that provides enough luxury, where a man is now a luxury item, and a relationship is a luxury item, and marriage is even more of a luxury item, which you're seeing more and more. And I think this is something that men have to come to terms with, is the women are essentially, and we're talking about like pretty much all women in Western society, but the loudest amongst them are pretty much saying, if I can't have a man in this particular type of situation, then I don't want one. And I think we have to come to terms with the fact that the at least in their mind, the bar has moved so far up that they will still have sex with some of us, and they might entertain short-term, air quotes, situationships with some of us, but for the most part, it's luxury or nothing. And I think, men are having a lot of men are having a difficult time seeing that their daughters and their mothers and their sisters and their aunts are showing you that, but you don't want to actually accept that that's what it is for many of them. And when we mentioned Kevin, when the die alone thing happened, that he said, the young lady that hung up on me said, well, he was killing hope. No, he was attempting to kill your delusion, but if you call that hope, then so be it. I think that's what exactly.
He's trying to check your ego. He's not killing hope. He's trying to check your ego and introduce your ego to some reality. That's it.
But
that's all.
Her hope is she can be 45 and find a high value man.
And that, it's the Sierra prayer, right? So at the end of the day, that's the problem. Go ahead.
Well, I think that. Hold on. I think the issue bigger than anything else, man, about Kevin Samuels to me is you got a group of women who have children already, who aren't the pick of the litter in terms of looks, who are demanding that they have access to a specific kind of man because they have a specific kind of romanticized ideal about what that man can do for them in relation to providing them with a life of material comfort and enable them to engage in conspicuous consumption.
Exactly.
As far as I'm concerned, this is absolute bullshit. That's why I did the show Provision and Protection. Men are supposed to provide and protect since when? Because throughout most of history, human beings lived in an agricultural traditional system. Okay? That men and women were interdependent. There was no, okay, I'm a man, I'm going off to work. You worked on the farm. The work consisted in men and women. Women, there weren't like these explicitly nuclear families. Aunts and uncles and all the people in the area kind of worked together to make things happen. They might have had individual farms or whatever, but it was a close-knit kind of familial kinship type of environment, right? Move away from that, and now what you have is these industrial megaplexes where people go to work every day and they work for a corporation, or maybe I don't see where else they work. Or a government agency or something like that. They make enough to subsist and to keep them satisfied. The average American in general, even white folks, they're 6 months away from being fucking destitute.
True.
Green Gorilla, Hollywood told me something different, and it's what you're talking real, Green Gorilla. For thousands of years, men and women have been in agricultural situations. but we're like historians in this place, and we care about data and history and facts. We're talking about the layman, and the layman woman only sees what Hollywood has told her for the past 30 some odd, 40 some odd years of her life, and that's what it is. Screw everything you just said.
Well, man, all this boomerang
Mm-hmm.
shit, girlfriend shit, all this, I'm an upscale, kind of girl.
City girl.
I'm living in my
Right.
world.
City girls.
The
For
problem
real.
is, the problem
I'm just
is-
saying, like, look, the average man in America makes between $30 to $60,000 a year.
Yeah.
Okay, the average man is what, around 5'8" tall. Okay,
Yep.
the average man doesn't have a 12-inch penis, can knock you down with a black card, and looks like fucking Idris Elba.
Yep.
And your pregnant ass already coming into the situation with kitties and shit, or demanding that you have access to dudes who are just basically running through chicks anyway. If they got their mind on being playboys. If they have their minds on their business, they already found the type of chick that they want, and maybe perhaps went through a divorce or something like that with her, or they got their mind so focused on making paper that they don't have time to be, courting and engaging in the manipulation game and the trials and the tribulations that go along with vetting somebody. Who wants to engage in, especially if you know that women are coming. I saw a video yesterday, man, where this one girl was like, I want a man to pay my rent, but I don't want to have sex with him. I don't really want a relationship. I just want to find me a man who's going to pay.
Yep. And she was
I'm like, batch. I'm using Kevin language now. Batch, who the fuck is going to give you that? Like, and then like, how long do you feel like you're going to get it? Like this new culture, man, they've been watching too much fucking Real Atlanta. I mean, the Real Housewives of Atlanta ain't even real fucking housewives. This is not even reality, man. It's a television show produced in order to present a specific kind of picture for people. They get paid primarily, they have business dealings and shit like that, but that's primarily generated from the spectacle of the show itself. Like, you take B-list actors and actresses and people in the music industry whose careers have already fucking ended, put them on a television screen, create a script and a narrative, and then everybody wants to be like these motherfuckers. And you already know that half of the people in the music industry are fucking broke. And that 3 to 5 years out of being out of the, the sports industry, most brothers and, men are fucking broke. Like, I mean, this shit's getting better now than what it has been. But I mean, if you don't invest and watch your bread, you still broke.
and Gigi, here's another thing. I mean, the culture is just like the food, man. It's a lot of it's fast and a lot of it's fake. It's
I
just,
like that. True.
None of it, yeah, man. None of it has the actual background work. It has all the flash and none of the shooting in the gym that actually takes the work. And then you have people on top of that. Then you have an education system that's pumping out people who only learn information off of scripts and out of books and
George Carlin called it obedient workers.
Obedient workers, but they can't critically think for themselves. So they look at these images and just with the blanket mind, with how the mind works. I mean, the mind will trick you if you don't know how to properly use and operate your own brain. It'll trick you into believing that these people are just genetically just built this way, just cut and shredded, and that he just made this shots because he was lucky, like he was just born that good. But in ultimate, in reality, he may have some attributes that assisted him in certain kind of ways, but it's not like nobody else didn't have those attributes. And he kind of had the situation and the environment necessary to push himself into the spotlight versus he just popped on the scene. The problem is a lot of these women today think. I mean, you even hear it with Steph Co. Even with her class of women talking about the entertainers and athletes, and just you just hearing how she talks about it. It's just the honest.
Pookie, let me get in there.
Hold on, brother. Hold on, brother. The honest belief that there's no work involved. And then what are you gonna say, Mr.
It's not that there's no work involved. I said it already. It's I want this. And I want it, and I don't care about anything you're talking about. Look, they've decided that it's luxury or bust. And it's gonna, most of us are still young enough where we're gonna see what that means in 20, 30 years. Y'all keep on hearing me say it. You got to give it a couple decades. You're gonna see many of them antidepressants. You're gonna see many of them on self-deletion watch, I'll call it that. You're going to see that because when the reality hits them, when there's no more plays to be made, when they used all the cards up, that's what we're going to see. And it is sad. And I hear where brothers are coming from. I see our dismay. I see our sadness, because these are your mothers, man. Like, this is not a game. Like, these are really people we know, right? We know these people. We grew up with these people. We actually love these people, but they're in their own way. They're in their own way. They're telling you, hey, if I can't have this, what I was sold a dream by white corporate media, and that's what I want. And if I can't have it, screw your talk about ethereal this and deeper meaning that, and your shout out to Zoe Williams, your Zoe Williams sounding as screw all of that, right? The Green Gorilla was just giving us a history lesson. Yeah, screw all of that talk about agriculture, and I don't care. I want it, and I want it now. And so what you see with Ostefco is the bar. That's what a bar is now. Right. Same thing with the sister that I covered a couple months ago. That I want this. I don't want a nigga. I want this nigga. Right. So that's what a bar is. And we just gonna have to come to terms, and that's gonna hurt a lot of us brothers too, because you actually want these women. And I'm not even trying to.
And
mock
even
us,
the women that even the women that have those men, they're unsatisfied with those men.
Of course not.
So at the end of the day, man, you get left right back where the fuck you started from to begin with anyway. I mean, like, who has more than Tiger Woods, Michael Jordan, Emmitt Smith, and fucking Luther Campbell and all these other guys, man, going through all these fucking divorces and all these problems, man. See, look, at the end of the day, man, we got dysfunction in relationships with people because people are too focused and enamored by fucking style more than they are with substance.
Facts.
People are more worried about conspicuous consumption and a life of leisure than they are about relationships, which are the things that make you the most fucking happy in the world, man. Like, you don't have to be rich if you have a rich relationship. If you have understanding and you have the ability to fucking interrelate. You know what I'm saying? Because even if you rich as a motherfucker and you ain't got no friends, you're miserable. The word miserly or miserable is rooted in the word miser. By, hoarding shit and having it all to yourself and having nobody to share it with. So at the end of the day, you stuck right back where you started from. And look, man, all I can say is, man, everybody, I mean, look, there's a whole bunch of crazy shit happening, especially in the black community and the expectations about relationships and so on and so forth. But like, most black women ain't doing it that fucking big, no way. Even if they got these advanced degrees or if they have corporate jobs. I mean, okay, so you live in a certain kind of middle class lifestyle. But at the end of the fucking day, 1% of the American population has over 60% of the wealth. We're all in a fucking crunch, and nobody's paying attention to that because all we're focused on is this bullshit associated with Horatio Alger and associated with I'm so-called I want a high value man and a man that looks like this, a man who can do X, Y, and Z for me. Hey man, look, Americans in general are some superficial, stylistic, self-important, narcissistic motherfuckers, man. It just is what it is. But back to the subject at hand, like Media Innovator said, man. Any old black man will do, man. At the end of the day, that was the subject matter for which I actually came in. To talk about the ways in which black men are utilized as scapegoats in order to fulfill whatever sick objective anybody in this culture has. If they want to get back at you, scapegoat you. Use the narrative and the myth about your impropriety. If it's the case that you want to get away with some shit, murder, or if you feel like just you need some attention, blame it on a black man, blame some ignorant shit on a black man, everybody will come pay you some fucking attention. Everybody will be behind your cause and rally around efforts to get those dirty sons of guns. I wanted to say sons of bitches. I don't know why I ain't say it because I've been cursing the whole time through. So at the end of the day, look, man, we're in a quagmire here, but the only thing I want to do is to discuss tomorrow the various ways in which this narrative is not only utilized by persons from the out group, but how it's utilized by people from our own community, how black women also utilize the trope and they puff it and blow it up in order to be vindictive and to get their fucking way. So at the end of the day, man, we're fucked all around. And no, we don't need to shut up and be quiet. No, we don't need to say shit softly and quietly and be tone police. We got issues we got to deal with, and we can say them how we fucking damn well please. It just is what it is, man.
You know, Green Gorilla, and I'm gonna say something that you and Dr. Hassan have already said, but I think it's apropos for where you are right now. But if those are the tools on the table for female advancement, black women advancement, then of course they're going to use those tools. If academia and the white media and white corporations and white politicians, if the tools on the table are, I just need you to regurgitate to me how bad black men are, of course black women are going to pick that up, knowingly and unknowingly. Right? Consciously and unconsciously. Of course they're going to do that. And that's what we see all over the place. The only issue I have is that when the chickens come home to roost, when life or the universe or God, whatever you believe in, give you the receipt for that mentality and for doing that to black men and for advocating the same way white racists advocate, then you throw a fit. When you advocate for just you and yourself and other black women, and then 15 years down the line, you wonder where all the men supposedly on your level are, well, you advocated for you and just other black women, right? So like that, you know, I think that what we see going on with women in general, black women specifically, when it comes to just, you know, any black man will do, they're throwing a fit because the receipt for that is coming through. The invoice for that is coming through, right? So I'm almost on some, you know, Marie Antoinette, let them eat cake type shit. I mean, this is your foremothers said certain things about their own sons. And now that their daughters supposedly don't have men, air quotes, on their level, well, I mean, you advocate, this is what you advocated for 20 and 30 years ago.
But look, it ain't, you know, look, it's them advocating for that shit, and it's black girl magic. But like I said before, and I'll say this again, black girl magic is nothing more than, you know, a mental acquiescence to anti-black misandry. I mean, you know, and I hate to say that, but it's just the truth, man. The whole concept is predicated around exceptional performance or exceptionality on their behalf, when in actuality is rooted in our marginalization and our demarcation and not being absorbed into the body politic the way we should be. It's just that fucking simple. But fellas, hey man, I'm about to wrap this up. I'm at the 2-hour mark. I really intended to go for only like maybe perhaps an hour today because I just wanted to say it and then segue it into what I'm going to do tomorrow. But, you know, I appreciate you for coming out. And
thanks for having me, Green Gorilla.
For sure. I appreciate you for joining me, man. You know, several things I want to make in terms of a point. Number one, remember it and be able to assert it confidently. Racism is primarily exercised as a form of anti-misandric aggression. It just is what it is. Racism is essentially anti-misandric aggression, one group of men against another group of men. Patriarchy, in essence, is not as Marxists would articulate it. It's not all women are subjected to the patriarchal power of men. Patriarchy is a form of kinship bonds formed by powerful men in order to stymie the development of other men. And women can participate in just as much as men can and can be empowered by it just as much as men can. Remember that. It's important for you to remember that and to be able to regurgitate it. Also, understand this. When it gets stated that you are causing so much harm and dysfunction related to your brutality and your violence, go to the data, go to the CDC, use the information we've given you. Women are just as likely, if not more likely, to commit acts of violence, including sexual assault, as are men. And in fact, in many instances, they're more likely. So it's time to set the record straight. It's just time to tell the truth. It's time to pay the piper. It's time to, like Z said, it's time to have the invoices come due. It's time to pay the bills. And the bills are just to tell the truth, man, at the end of the fucking day. So having said that, man, I fare you well. Godspeed. And, you know, like your boy Stan Lee used to say, Excelsior, man. I'll holler at you guys later, man. Peace.